Good day, all you podcasters out there in Podcastville. This is Pastor Rex, and once again we come to you from right here at Christian Life Austin, 4700 Westgate Boulevard, and we're bringing you a beautiful podcast. Now, normally these podcasts are released on the first Monday of the month, but we decided to wait just a little longer on this one because we're honoring fathers this month, and we wanted to get it closer to Father's Day. And so we are honoring somebody today and interviewing somebody today that you're going to truly enjoy. I promise that. You'll enjoy what he has to say. But I want to say a few things about dads today. I want to tell you a story about a man named Greg. At 43, Greg is a dentist, and his entire body is wrapped in Velcro, and he's suspended on a wall high above the ground. Anyone want to speculate why? The answer is simple. A dare from his 11-year-old son while driving past a carnival one day. The father and the son spied a sign saying Velcro wall. And the son, 11-year-old son, said those taunting words, "You'd never do that, Dad." That did it. Greg, the dentist, put on a suit covered with Velcro. With the help of a huge bungee cords, he launched high onto the Velcro wall. There he stuck. All the while, his son was cheering from below like a mad boy. Dr. Greg demonstrated one of the greatest qualities of fatherhood. He showed sticking power. So in this conversation today, we're going to talk about a dad, a father, from a son's perspective that had sticking power. Now, recent reports showed more long-distance calls are made on Mother's Day than any other day of the year. But don't worry, Dad. The same report said that there are more collect calls to home phones placed on Father's Day than any other day of the year. Dad, we want to come to you today and say you are important. Please let me talk to you, and let's speak today on this great quality of fathers. On countless studies, authorities have found that the likelihood of criminal activity, delinquency in minors, suicide, depression, drug, alcohol abuse, and teen pregnancy increases enormously from one factor that is missing in the home. Dad, that's you. Children raised without the influence of a father are 2 or 3 times more likely to have behavioral and psychological problems than those kids who have a father. 70% of those incarcerated in detention facilities were raised without fathers. 75% of teen suicides and 80% of all psychiatric admissions among youth share the same common trait: no dad in the home. Young men whose fathers die before they reach adolescence have the greatest difficulty making a successful adjustment to marriage. And women who feel that their fathers abandoned them exhibit greater promiscuity behavior in adulthood. Dad, this podcast is about this. We have a role to play. It's a very important role, and I will tell you this. I believe in fatherhood. I believe it's one of the most lost arts in America today. There's a lot of daddies, but there's not a lot of fathers. The Bible said we have many instructors, but not many fathers. So today we come to you from right here in Austin, Texas, talking about the need for and the want to of great, great fathers in America and in the world today. And so today I introduce a young man who is a father. He's also a pastor. He's a minister. He's got 3 of the finest young men that you'll ever meet in your life, and we're going to show a picture of them. And he's got a wonderful wife, and they work here. He's on the preaching staff of Christian Life Austin. He's also our young adult pastor, and what a remarkable job he is doing. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, I call him Dr. Phil all the time. That's not really true. He's just straight up Philip Daigle. Would you welcome him right now to our podcast? Philip, we're glad to have you, buddy. It's an honor to have you on the program today.
You know, what an honor to be with you here, Pastor Rex. And I've been watching your podcast and following it, and you've had some pretty amazing people. So I'm confused why you're having me today.
Well, every now and then, you have to scrape the barrel.
That's
You know
right.
what I'm saying.
Well, you
got to get to the
today.
bottom. No.
Well, I'm honored to be here.
You
with
are
you.
here specifically for the reason of the fact that you probably had one of the finest fathers.
Yeah.
And I may weep in this today, but you probably had one of the finest fathers that ever walked the earth.
Yeah.
I mean, he just had it. He
Yeah.
had it. His having children, I think you had 2 sisters and a brother, so
Yes,
there's
sir.
4 of you in the family.
Yeah.
And his walk with God was so steady
Yeah.
that every one of his children, even though he had a home going quicker than we all wanted,
Yes, sir.
but it still works. It still
Yeah.
motivates. It still perpetuates.
That's right.
Even into your kids.
Yes,
Your
sir.
kids love this house. They love
Yeah.
church. And so we're going to talk about your dad a little bit today on Father's Day because there's no reason putting dads down. We might as well lift dads
That's
up.
right.
And your dad was a lifter.
Yeah.
So why don't we go into that just a little bit and just talk about perhaps how you were raised. You're a PK. You're
Yeah.
a preacher's kid.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And some of those are wild and woolly.
Yes, sir.
But you're not. You're one of those guys that you've captured your dad's essence, and then you've grabbed a hold of an anointing from God yourself.
Yes, sir.
And with that father as your background and the shoulders to stand on, and the anointing that God's placed on you, wow, you got a great, great future. In fact, you got a great present happening in you right now.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk a little bit about
Yeah.
Skippy Daigle, my buddy, Skippy Daigle. Let's talk about him.
One of the first things I want to say, too, is, it seems like Mother's Day, we really celebrate moms pretty good. But Father's Day, it feels like we're getting challenged quite a bit. But I love that, we're celebrating dads, and they should be celebrated.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful to get to talk about my dad, who was a friend of yours.
Oh, I loved him. Yeah.
And I heard him talk so highly of Rex Johnson.
He was august.
Yeah.
He wasn't a follower of the pack.
Right.
He was an eagle.
Yeah.
He was an eagle. He soared. He never worried about who he got to sit with at a conference.
That's right.
He went and found a seat and said, "You can sit by me if you want to, but I'm going to sit here."
That's right.
He was that kind of guy, and I love that kind of person that he was, a tremendous guy. So tell us a little bit about your youth and about how you were brought into this world, and maybe some of the qualities that your dad and mom both had in your growing up.
Absolutely. So, my dad, first of all, was not raised in the church, wasn't raised really going to church, and joined the military, became a hippie, was searching for God when I would say God found him. And just
Nathaniel.
That's right. Just a miraculous conversion story where somebody who was living a crazy lifestyle on drugs walked into a church on a Friday night, and God touched him, and he never looked back. I remember hearing the story many times. He had some cigarettes in his pocket, and he walked into the bathroom and threw them in the trash can, never picked one up ever again. That God had a miraculous conversion in his life. But it wasn't just the story of the conversion. He lived that out for the rest of his life. I never knew anything but a kind, gentle, loving man. And I heard different stories of him as a 25-year-old hippie. I think he lived a little bit different. But, God found him. He was looking for God, but God found him. And he raised an incredible family. 4 kids who are in the ministry and love God, and he made the ministry fun.
Yes.
And I think that's why I'm in the ministry today.
That's it. Yeah.
It wasn't a burden to go to church. It wasn't a burden to serve. It wasn't a burden to love people. In fact, he made it fun. We went to Katy, Texas when I was 3 years old in 1986.
Okay, your dad went to church in Port Arthur.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right.
Right. Was from Port Arthur, went
Were
to
you
Lamar.
born there?
I was born in Port Arthur. He went to Lamar University and was from the Golden Triangle. But God, put a calling on his life to plant a church in Katy, Texas. And so we moved there. And I remember we found a storefront where we had church. And I remember for about 3-4 months, nobody showed up. When I tell you it was home church, we had a different definition because it was literally only the people in our home having church. But
Six.
That's right.
The mighty six.
That's right. But he was faithful to his calling. He was faithful in the small things. And one story I think sticks out to me so much. And as I get older, I think about this often. But I remember the first day somebody showed up at our church. It was a big thing because nobody had showed up. So we had our first guest, and Esteban walks through the doors. I'll never forget it. He was wearing a suit and tie, and if you ever met Esteban, he was a young man in his 20s, but I would say he was mentally challenged, had some struggles in his life, but saw our church and said he would come check it out. And he walked to our church from the neighborhood, and so my dad said, hey, do you have a ride? And he said, no. He said, well, let me take you home. Well, he took him home, and then that Sunday night for church, he picked him up, and that Wednesday night, he picked him up for church, and he picked him up every service that our doors were open. He picked up Esteban until my brother could drive. And when my brother could drive, he picked up Esteban. That's right.
He got Esteban in his car.
And it became a family deal. Even my older sister and brother-in-law, they went and picked up Esteban. And that happened until your boy right here could drive. And guess
That's
what?
So
I picked him up, but I was with my dad a lot of times when we picked him up. But what he showed me is how he served people and how he loved people. And I remember at my dad's funeral, there were some dignitaries there. There was a lot of pastors. There was a lot of people there. And I remember specifically, though, there was one person that cried harder than anybody, and that was Esteban. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget the impact that it had on his life. And I don't know in those moments what my dad was thinking. I don't know if he was doing it for me or doing it because he just felt like God had called him to do it, but I know that he did it. And he served the least of these.
That's
right.
a true shepherd. He left 99 in the wilderness and went and found one.
Well, and I've heard you say this, that if you're too big to serve, you're too small to lead.
That's right.
And what he showed me was that you're never too big to serve people that are in need.
Yeah.
And that was the legacy that he left in our world and in our lives, that that we serve people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you came up and your call to the ministry.
Yeah.
Was it after your dad passed when you was like 20 years old?
20 years old.
He died of cancer.
Yes, sir.
And so did you feel this call before or after?
Yeah.
Did he know
Yeah.
before he passed that you were going to do this gospel thing?
Yeah, I remember when I went to him, I was 17 years old, and I felt the call to the ministry, and I went in, I told my dad, I said, hey, Dad, I think God's calling me. I felt it. I was feeling the anointing. I felt like God is preparing the way, and I went to him, and I told him, and he said, okay. And I was like, well, that was not the response I was expecting.
He didn't jump up. Yeah.
And I remember thinking about it for about 2 weeks, and finally it just had gotten to me, and I went to him. I said, Dad, do you think I shouldn't do this? Do you think I'm not called to the ministry? And he said, I'd rather you do anything but the ministry. And he said, and the truth is, you have to know this, that only God can call you. And he said, I'm glad that you feel that, but you have to wrestle in your heart. Is it man calling you? Is it somebody putting pressure on you? He said, is it an outside influence, or is this truly God calling you? He said, because when you join the ministry, he said, you're not just fighting your battles, you're fighting battles for other people as well.
That's right.
And he said, if you can't fight your own battles, you're not going to be able to fight battles for other people. And he said, he said, son, I'm happy. I want you to do this. This is something you feel called to do. But he said, know this, that you can live an amazing life without doing this. But you've got to know in your heart, and you've got to wrestle in your heart and know that you're called. And that was a huge influence, in my life, that when I ended up going to Bible college and pursuing the ministry, it was always in the back of my mind that I didn't feel like he forced me into the family business. I didn't feel like he was pressuring me to be somebody that I was not. And after he left and left us, I think what stayed with me was this is really who I am, and this is what I'm called to do.
Yeah,
and
it just fits. It feels right.
Yeah.
It's when you're really called, it's a natural thing.
That's right.
Yeah, it's organic.
Yes, sir.
You're not a wannabe. You're not trying to emulate.
Yeah.
It's just who you are.
Yeah.
This is who I am, and I am ministry.
Yeah.
You know, Philip, my dad was not in the ministry.
Yeah.
And he wasn't a vocal person.
Right.
He led through just committed silence.
Yeah.
He just was. He took us to church. He brought me to his side every night in prayer and put his arm around me and prayed for me 20 seconds, 25 seconds. But those seconds became monumental to me.
Yeah.
Dad led by a silence. And so, you know, I've always appreciated that fact about my father, because my pastor, when I told him I was called to preach, he said, "You're no more called to preach than that piano over there."
Yeah.
Well, it hurt my feelings.
Sure.
It hurt my feelings. Then he wadded up a piece of paper and he threw it on the floor and he said, "Pick up that paper, son. That's all you're going to be doing is picking up trash
Wow.
in the ministry." And so I picked up that paper and I said, "Can I recycle this?" He kind of laughed. But he didn't believe in me either. But I think your dad allowing you to find your own way is the quality of a super father. That's a super father. Now, I'd like to say something about your dad. He was outside the lines.
Sure.
He was outside the lines. You called him maybe hippie-ish, whatever, but he had a purity.
Yeah.
He was a Nathaniel.
Mm-hmm.
Nathaniel, the Lord said, "I saw you when you was under the fig tree."
Yeah.
And he said, and I knew, he said, "There's no guile in him." Your dad was a man that had no guile. He just was who he was, and he's produced children. You and your brother and your two sisters, he's produced children that have no guile. I mean, I've been around at least three of them. I hadn't been around one of your sisters, but I've been around three of them, and all three of y'all have the same kind of smile and outward look and upward glow. And it's just amazing how that comes across. That's daddy.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a father.
That's right.
That put that in you. So I want you to kind of tell me how that his life, how that his passing, and now how that his memory has spurred you to do what you need to do. And do you ever look back and call on one of his prayers or call on one of his attaboy, Philip? Any of those things. So let's just talk about that. Let's talk about the Skippy in that area.
Yeah, and, you know, I think it should be noted, too, you know, I remember some of the lessons he taught me, but more than that, I remember the way he loved me.
Right.
I remember how I felt. You know, I think the dad should remember that, too. I'm thankful for the lessons that you teach your kids and the discipline and the good things, maybe teach them how to work on a car, how to hit a baseball. That's all great.
Yeah. You love that baseball.
No, that's now I'm preaching to myself here. And it's great, but the way that you love them, if you really truly want to have an impact on their world, the way that you love them, they'll do anything you ask them. That's right.
Right.
And that's I think the impact that he had on, you know, my life. He's been gone now for 20 years. I remember the way that he loved me.
Yeah.
I remember the gentleness, and he was a tough man on Saturday mornings. My sisters got to sleep in. Me and my brother, we had to be outside mowing the yard. And I remember he'd come in.
I pity you.
I know. It was a hard life. He'd come in on Saturday. He'd tell me, he said, you know, on Friday night, I'm not giving you a curfew, but 7:30, you better be up mowing the yard. I said, "Oh, okay, Dad, that's fine. No curfew, I can live with that." I didn't realize there was a consequence at 7:30. He'd come in a few times and he would he'd say, "Son, it's time to wake up." You know, real gentle. The next time he'd come in, he'd flip the light on and said, "Get up." The third time, he's either pulling me off the bed or he's throwing water on me, one or the other. And so he had a gentle side, but he had a pretty stern side. But, you know, one of the stories that I think about that had such a huge impact on me. In fact, I was talking to my sister earlier about this. I was 12 years old, and we went to camp meeting. That was something that was a part of our world.
It was a big deal back in that day.
Part of our lives. And, you know, I think the Lufkin campgrounds in Texas probably had maybe 6,000 people, and it was a full service and it was a full night. And I'll never forget the leader of the conference. He got up and he said, "You know, we want to celebrate something this year." He said, "If you're a pastor, I want you to stand." And so he has all the pastors stand. He said, I just want to go around the room. We're talking 6,000 people. This is a lot of people. He said, I want to hear how many people have received Jesus at your church this year. Well, I was 12 years old, and I was standing in the back hanging out with my friends trying to be cool.
You couldn't sit in the seat that long.
No, absolutely not. He said, we want to start over here. And they start over here on the right side. And pastors were throwing out 500, 400, 250. And every time they would say it, man, the service, the people there would just celebrate and they would clap. And I remember standing in the back thinking, I don't think we've had a lot of people in our church, much less people get saved. I don't even know how many people have been saved this year. And
right.
I knew there had been a few, and I was concerned for my dad. All these people were talking about what they had experienced in their
embarrassed for your dad.
That's right.
That's right.
And I could see him standing there, and I was standing in the back waiting for them to get to my dad. And my friends were talking. I remember getting more and more nervous as he got closer to my dad. And I'll never forget that moment when he looked at my dad and it was his turn. And growing up in the culture that we were in, he called him Brother Daigle. He said, Brother Daigle, how many? I'll never forget what my dad did in that moment. He threw his hand in the air and he yelled, 2. And in that context, he started jumping up and down and shouting, and 6,000 people started celebrating. And in that moment, it just showed me who my dad was.
Yeah.
Number one, he was confident and he was secure in who he was. He didn't need the affirmation of man. But he also showed me that, a lot of times in church we talk about being faithful in the small things and God will give us bigger things. Mm-hmm. Well, he also showed me in that moment that you be faithful in the small things, whether the big things come or not.
That's right.
In other words, we're faithful with what God has given us.
That's right. And
maybe it seems small to somebody else, but to those two people, it was their world. Mm-hmm. And that was the legacy of who my dad was. Confident, who he was. He wasn't afraid of what other people were going to think about. In fact, he owned the moment. Yeah. And so while they celebrated the 500, when they got to the 2, man, that place exploded. It reminded me of heaven too. The Bible says that whenever sinner repents, when one sinner repents, that heaven rejoices. And so while people focus on the numbers, and I think the church culture today does a good job because every number represents a soul. Mm-hmm. That's good, and I think that we should count those numbers. I think that we should remember that the one is just as important as the many. And that's right. That was some of the things that my dad showed me.
And that's one of the things that drew me to him. He was unique. He was comfortable in his own skin.
Yeah.
He was not I want to be like that guy. He wasn't. He wanted to be like Jesus.
That's right.
He wanted to love people individually like he did Esteban.
Yeah.
He wanted to be that kind of pastor, and he was.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of my favorite peeps. He really was.
Yeah.
He's a favorite of mine, and we'd high-five each other and hug each other. He was I call it this way. I got this from Stuart Scott on ESPN, but he was cool as the other side of the pillow.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just a neat human being,
right.
And he produced a neat human being in you. And so, did he play ball like you? Was he a baller?
He played back. He got up every morning and he played racquetball and basketball.
So he's an athlete.
He was an athlete. He played up until the time he got sick with cancer when he was 51. Every morning I remember him getting up at 4:30 in the morning going to play basketball and racquetball. And man, some of my fondest memories were he would do it during the week, but on Saturdays he would take his sons with him and we'd go with him. Now, as I was 12 or 13, he'd let me play with the older guys, and I'd try to cross over and give him behind the back passes, and he'd want me so much to be fundamental. But sure enough, when I would make the behind-the-back pass, he'd shake his head and then he'd smile because he liked it. He liked the flair. And, he was an athlete. He loved sports and he loved competition. And he taught me so often that you can be competitive and kind at the same time.
That's right. That's what we do here.
That's right.
You got to compete because we have an enemy.
That's right.
We have an enemy that wants to take the church down, but we have to learn to compete. And so, yes, my dad pushed that in me also.
Yeah. And you talked about how you were friends with him. I'll never forget. He was sick at the time and had cancer and was struggling, but we were still going to church. And I'll never forget, there was a pastor that was coming to town. At the time, he'd pastored for 15 years. And when he got sick, we went over to a different church in Houston, and Rex Johnson was coming to town on a Sunday night to preach. And on our way there, my dad told me, he said, now, son, I may not be a big-time preacher, but he said, I know the big-time preachers. Oh, and guess what? If people don't know that,
you're embarrassing
there was
me.
Nobody bigger in our context and our culture than Pastor Rex Johnson. And so I thought, okay, Dad, Right. Of course you do. And I laughed to myself, and I'll never forget. You got up and you preached that night. You preached about Jesus getting up out of the tomb, and you talked about the 1980 Miracle USA team, and you talked about getting up off the deck. And my dad was going through that time in his life where he was having to show us the way and get up off that deck. And I'll never forget, though, I was standing talking to some friends, and we were in the altar area of the church, and I could see my dad looking at me, and I heard this big booming voice, and it was the voice of Rex Johnson. He said, "Skippy Daigle." Yeah. And I looked over, and my dad was hugging you while looking at me, and I could just see his face, and he just looked at me and gave me a little wink like I told you buddies. So. And I thought that y'all, and just that small, it was a small moment to know maybe you guys weren't best friends, but when y'all saw each other, there was a kindred spirit.
Yeah. And he just had it. I mean, he had it. I was kind of cut out of the same cloth. Yeah. I really was, because there was not anything in my life that promoted me into this. Right. There's what we call the blue blood ministries, the people that have sons and and grandsons, and that wasn't in our family. We had a lot of outlaws in our family. Sure. We really did. A lot of people that were sinners. In fact, the sinners really outweighed the saints in our family on both sides. Right. But you have to scrap, you have to get up, you have to go, and you have to have a special something, and your dad had that. And I think that's what brought us together. Yes. Is the fact that we both had the same beginnings, humble beginnings and starts, you know. And where am I going to be next? Right. I did more storefronts than I did anything when I first started preaching. Yes, sir. And so the bottom line of all of that is that brought our friendship together. Yes. And it also put a drive in every one of his kids. Yeah. Because y'all emulated the fact that if you're going to go somewhere, you got to first get up. Right. That's right. The first step is getting up, and then you got to say, "I'm going." But you got to get up first, When I've heard you say that, you were raised with a wooden spoon in your mouth. That's right. And that was my dad too. Yeah. And I see, though, the way your kids love the ministry and the way that they serve, and the truth is, I know that it's because of the way that you love them. Yeah. And there's that grit, there's that fight that you have to have in ministry, because it's not always easy. And my dad used to always say, "Got to be a self-starter." That's right. Yeah. And he said, if you want to get rid of all the problems in your church, it's easy. Just get rid of all the people. And he just always taught me there's going to be Skippy for that philosophy. 101 Skippy.
That's
Skippy
right.
101.
He taught me there's going to be problems with people, but you've got to have strength, and that's what leadership is. It's having strength in spite of what somebody might say about you or not like about you, and that's really what I think there was the kindred spirit between you and my dad in that area of, hey, I'm going to smile. Yeah. I'm going to love you. I might know that you've talked about me. I might know that you've said something about me, but matter. I'm just going to keep on loving it. And there's something so incredibly inspiring about that type of spirit and attitude.
Yeah. I've always taught there's more felt than telt. There's more caught than taught. Yeah. And so the bottom line is that what you are produces more of an energy to people than what you say. Yeah. Words many times come pretty cheap. Yeah. But character is a lifelong thing. That's right. Character is a lifelong thing. So, Philip, let's talk about you just a minute. Now, you're in the ministry. Yeah. Got 3 precious boys, and they're incredible. And you're a baller. You were a baller in high school. You played basketball.
I used to be, I think.
No. You I really think that you're one of those kind of guys that coulda, woulda, shoulda. Yes, that could have been. I really think you could have made that step into – I know you could have played in a D2 school. Yes, I know that, but you probably could have found a D1 school that because there's not a lot of kids could shoot like you. In fact, when I first saw you at a camp, I saw you hit 6 3-pointers in a row. and I don't care if you're guarded or not guarded. That's right. I saw you hit 6 in a row when you ran by me. I slapped you on the backside, and I said, "Go get him, son. Go get him." Yeah. Because I saw a little bit of me, and we've always talked. If we was both 18, who could take the other one? Yeah. Well, there's no question in my mind.
Well, I think the way you would even say it is, you could still take me in horse today.
Did I say that?
Yeah, you would tell me that. Oh, you said, "I may not be able to run with you, but I can beat you in horse."
But anyhow, tell me a little bit about tell me a little bit about the fact that how you could have maybe gone into certain areas of life, but you chose this road. You chose this road because you felt God's calling. But God can use people in coaching. God can use people, in mentoring.
Right.
I mean, he could use you in a lot of areas, but you chose this area. So kind of help me with that, how you arrived where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I feel like sports is such a microcosm of life.
Yes.
And there's so many lessons to be learned in it. But I just want you to know I will be paying you the amount that I promised for saying those nice things about me. Playing D1. I definitely loved to play.
He didn't promise me anything, folks. He's messing with you right now.
No, I love the game, and I love to play. And I would even say after my dad passed, it was really a form of me grieving to go out there and play. And my dad, he was such a big supporter of me on the court. One of my favorite memories is I was a junior in high school, and we were about to have to go to state, and we were playing our big rival and tie game. The only buzzer beater I ever hit was to go to the playoffs, and it was one of the last games that my dad ever saw me play. I had the video. I'll never forget it. He was sitting up in the balcony away from everybody just so he could watch the game. And
Skippy.
That's right. He threw the ball in, and I made one move with 3 seconds to go and threw it up, nothing but net. And
come on.
I remember the team.
Was it short? You hit the net short, or was it in
it was nothing but net. It was in the net. And I'll never forget the team celebrating with me. I remember the video. We had, VHS ability back then. This was before Instagram and Ball is Life Instagram accounts, but it went through, and I could see on the camera the team celebrating with me, and then I could see my dad up in the stands just walking back and forth, just pumping his fists. And there's moments where I know that he was proud of me, but I know there's moments that if he can see me now, how proud he would be, because of 2 reasons. He loved the Kilgore family, and that was a church that I worked for 5 years before I was given the opportunity to come here, and he loved the Kilgores, and for me to be able to work for them was such a huge honor. But then to get the call from Rex Johnson. We didn't hesitate. We had been praying for what our next move was, and when you called, we knew that it was from God. And there's days where I have surreal moments where I'm standing on a stage or on a platform, and I see you over there, and I'll be preaching, and nobody else in the room will be standing, but you'll be standing, saying, "Come on," just supporting. And you've done that for every minister that's come through. You've been such an incredible father figure for so many people, and there's just those surreal moments where I just think, I may be even in the middle of preaching, but I think, man, Dad, if you could, I hope you can see. I don't know if you can or not, but if you can see, I know how happy you'd be.
I think they can.
Yeah.
I think they can. That's just, might as well.
Yeah.
I mean, heaven's going to be a beautiful place, but I think they can. God just does all things well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just, I know how proud he would be and how happy. And so if he can see, I know he's happy, and I know he's happy about this moment right now, and I'm honored to get to be able to work with you and work for you. And I think those are some of the things that spur me on in moments. I think if you're alive, you've had moments of discouragement and moments of doubt and moments of fear and moments where you feel like nobody sees you or believes in you, and because of the love of the Father that I had. And I know that he loved me because, he had a great dad too, but he also had such a special relationship with Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was that special intimacy where I'd be sitting in a service with him, and I'd look over and there'd be tears rolling down his face, and I knew that God had changed his life. And so there's these moments where I think back, and it's what spurs me on, even in those moments of discouragement and I think that people need to remember that as dads, the influence and the impact that you have with other people. But not just with other people, the impact that you have on your children just by truly loving them and showing them the way.
Okay, we're going to wrap this thing up.
Yes, sir.
So I want you to talk about your boys just a little bit. Now, don't take another 30
don't take
minutes.
Too long. Okay.
No. And your sweet wife.
Yeah.
You got a tremendous family.
Yes,
you have
sir.
a tremendous family, Philip, and it's just an honor
Yeah.
to have all them. And we're filming this in the green room at the church here, and
Yeah.
those little boys of yours love this place.
Yes, sir.
You have made church a happy place for your kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the goals of life. You know, I used to tell churches, you know, I had a drug habit when I was a kid. My folks drugged me to church on Sunday, Wednesday. And I still have those drugs in my body. And so I think my kids always had a happy experience in church, and church was a happy place, and I think your children do. Tell us a little bit about your boys.
You know, the scripture in Psalms, it says that, you know, children are like arrows in the hands of a warrior.
Right.
And ever since I've had kids, I've felt like more of a warrior than I did before them. And I see the blessing of what God has given me in those boys. And, you know, I think about many times after my dad had passed how much I desired a father figure in my life. I felt empty, and I felt abandoned. I felt like sometimes people didn't know what I was going through, and I felt like I had a calling on my life and a purpose. And it's so funny because I didn't really notice it, but after Brady, my oldest, was born, it's like that feeling started to go away, but I didn't really notice it. And then one day, at some point of having kids, I realized I don't have that desire anymore for someone to step in and fill that role. Mm-hmm. And what I realized, the thing that I wanted so much is what God wanted me to be. And I missed having a dad. I missed having a father, but I think he put that desire in me so that I could be a father. Mm-hmm. And, you know, God allowed me to do that through my amazing wife, Annie. Yeah. And she's such a special person.
Yes, very sweet.
And, you know, what's funny is my dad had an incredible relationship with Annie. We dated in high school, and she would come over to the house, and he would just clown on me. He would make fun of me to her, and she loved it. I said, Dad, I'm going to stop bringing her over if all you do is make fun of me. But she loved it. They had a special connection, and he loved her. And this is such a true story, and it's almost too true to believe. But I went into his bedroom on the day that he was passing, and my mom said, you better tell him, you know, whatever you need to say. And I told him how much I loved him, and told him how much he meant to me, and what an incredible father he was. And then out of nowhere, I don't know why I told him this, but I told him me and Annie were broken up at the time, went through a few different breakups.
Yes.
As your daughters probably kept you up to date.
I heard about
on the drama.
Yes.
But we were broken up at the time. But in that moment, as I was telling him bye, I'll never forget the last thing I whispered to him. I said, and I just want you to know, I was 20 years old. I said, I just want you to know, I'm going to marry Annie. And, you know, for 10 years, I thought like that was such a foolish thing that I had said. But it was what I felt in my heart. Mm-hmm. And I knew I was going to do it. Mm-hmm. 10 years later, when me and my wife got back together, and future wife at the time, but we became husband and wife, I remember being on the phone with my wife, and it flashed back into my mind. And I said, Annie, you won't believe this. And I said, I've waited 10 years to tell you this. And I said, but the last thing that I ever told my dad, and I know that he could hear me, I said, I'm going to marry Annie. And there's been that special connection. We've been through a lot of ups and downs and dating. We dated for 12 years, but she has been the mother, a dream mother to my boys. And I think a lot of times people see me with them in the sports and the different things, but
they're awesome.
That's right.
Your kids are awesome.
What they don't know is they had a great mom.
Yeah, they do.
And now Brady, Dean, and Houston are the three best boys I could ever ask for.
I call him H-Town.
That's right.
Houston.
Brady's such a little leader, and Dean is such a sweet, sweet kid. And then
Houston,
you've
already got them loving the Astros.
Yep.
They go nuts.
Well, you know, there's a lesson in that too. People ask me at the baseball fields, they say, how'd you get them to work on baseball and practice? I said, well, I took them to the World Series. Yeah. I made them fall in love with the game, and they love it now. And I don't know if it's because I was trying to train them up, or that's what I loved. And I think it's what I loved, and I just drug them along with me too. But they're so much fun, and they've been such a joy, and they've brought such incredible purpose into my life. And I know my life wouldn't be the same without them. And I'm honored to be their dad. They don't even know how proud I am of them. And I hope one day they see this.
Philip, I'm so happy you came to be with me today.
Sir.
Boy, this has been good.
Yes, sir.
This has been good. I don't know how long we've gone. We probably broke the record on time-wise.
I hope not.
But, you know, I was thinking, this is how I'm going to close out.
Yes, sir.
Philip lost his dad when he was 20 years old. I lost a 4-year-old son when I was 31 years old.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it is over there, but there'd be no better man, I think, that kind of hug on my boy in heaven as your daddy. So I just think it's pretty cool. Dads, I want you to have a wonderful, wonderful Father's Day. Dads are loved here. And if you want to come worship with us on Dad's Day, we'll brag on you. We're not going to put you under the rug. We'll brag on you. We'll lift you. We love fathers. Our Heavenly Father taught us how to love fathers. And so God bless you. I hope this podcast rings a bell in your soul. I hope it warms your spirit like a nice, nice warm fire in the wintertime. And I hope it cools your heart like an air conditioner does in the summertime. I just hope you feel real good deep in your soul about what's been talked about today. We'll see you next month. God bless you. Thank you, Brother Phil. God bless all of you. Have a super day.